means for the global landscape. This weekend, Russia and Ukraine launched some of their largest drone attacks against each other, a signal that the war may be escalating as President-elect Trump prepares to take office. Russia said yesterday it intercepted and destroyed 70 Ukrainian drones, including 34 over the Moscow area. Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Russia launched a record 145 Iranian-made drones into Ukrainian territory. This comes as Ukraine's top commander warns that Moscow has amassed tens of thousands of soldiers preparing to retake land in the Kursk region, and after President Zelensky and the White House confirmed North Korean troops are training in Russia to join the fight against Ukraine. It also comes as the Kremlin is denying a report in the Washington Post that Trump and Vladimir Putin spoke on the phone in recent days, calling that reporting, quote, completely untrue. Joining me now is former U.S. ambassador to Russia and an NBC News international affairs analyst, Michael McFaul. Ambassador, thank you for your time today. The war in Ukraine is going to be among the first foreign policy challenges for the new president-elect. As we enter this transition period now, what is your mind? How might the fighting in Ukraine shift at this point? Will both of these countries become increasingly aggressive like we saw over the weekend?
Well, remember, candidate Trump pledged that he was going to end this war in 24 hours. He even said he would do it before inauguration. So there's lots of debate, speculation about what he plans to do, what will be his proposals for a peace treaty or an end of hostilities. And so both sides believe that they need to maximize their position on the ground before conversations about some kind of negotiated settlement occurs. So you're seeing those effects. You're seeing both sides escalate through the air. And just as you reported, and most certainly my colleagues in Ukraine have been telling me over the last 24 hours, they expect a major escalation in the Russian region of Kursk that will, for the first time, and maybe it already has happened, will include North Korean soldiers involved in that fight.
We also know that support for Ukraine among Republicans in this country has been fading. Is there really such a thing as sort of Trump-proofing U.S. support for Ukraine? I know the National Security Advisor said over the weekend that the administration plans to push out all the help that has been allocated for Ukraine before this Biden administration ends. Is there anything that President Biden can do in his final days that President-elect Trump can't easily undo?
Well, first, I just want to remind everybody that the last vote about aid to Ukraine, overwhelming majority of senators supported it. So if Mr. Trump is going to say we're not going to do that, he's going to be going against the grain of 85, 90 senators. And it was also overwhelming majority in the House. So this will be a debate. This will just not be a fait accompli. The president has a lot to say over U.S. foreign policy, but so does the U.S. Congress. But second, to your point, yes, the Biden administration is trying to get out the remaining pieces of that aid to Ukraine before January 20th. That's the right thing to do. European leaders are meeting to talk about what they might do, including even there's speculation about there might be a new alliance with Ukraine, with some Baltic states and Poland. And third, there's new talk about finally releasing the $300 billion in Russian foreign currency reserves that we froze rightly 2 years ago. There's discussion, and I think it's the right discussion. Give that money to Ukraine now before January 20th.
You did reference that North Korean troops are preparing to join combat operations with the Russians. What does North Korea get out of sending their soldiers to fight this war alongside the Russians?
Well, we don't know for sure. But I can guarantee you Kim Jong-un is not sending these soldiers to Russia. This is a major, major decision he's making for nothing. I suspect he thinks that he will get advanced technologies to enhance his weapon systems, primarily his rocket systems, on which he can put nuclear weapons. And I think that is a very dangerous development. And I hope President Trump, because he has a relationship with Putin and he has a relationship with Kim Jong-un, will do all in his power to stop that technology transfer. That is deeply destabilizing, especially for our allies in South Korea, but I would say for all of Asia.
Yeah, and we do have this reporting today from the Washington Post that Trump and Putin spoke by phone. NBC News has not been able to confirm that reporting, and the Trump campaign isn't commenting on any conversations that Trump has had with other world leaders, whether they happened or not. The Kremlin is calling this reporting false information, Ambassador. What do you think is going on here, knowing that Trump isn't always using sort of the normal diplomatic channels of communication?
This is kooky. I can't think of a better word. Like, we should be able to know whether the president of Russia and the president-elect of the United States of America talked or not. That should be a verifiable fact. That should not be this mystery that we are in right now. And Mr. Peskov, somebody I used to work with when I was ambassador, he's not constrained by the truth. Let's be clear about that. But I read his statement over and over. He seems pretty unequivocal. But I also know those Washington Post reporters, those are very good reporters. And so this is strange to me. I wonder, is somebody leaking something they overheard and was wrong? But we can do better than this. President-elect Trump should talk to world leaders. That's normal during transitions. But then he should put out statements about who he talked to. That's also normal. The American people have a right to know who he's speaking to, and the Biden administration has a right to know who he's speaking to because they are still in charge of American national security, at least until January 20th.
All right, Ambassador McFaul, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Well, it's not just the war in Ukraine that will be top of mind for President-elect Trump and his foreign policy agenda when he returns to the White House. Even as the presidential transition process is underway, the U.S. is continuing to look for a diplomatic solution to end the conflict in the Middle East. Next hour, Secretary Antony Blinken will host Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's top advisor, Ron Dermer, at the State Department. And late last week, on his last day in office, Israel's now ousted defense minister met with hostage families, telling them there is no military reason for Israel to remain in Gaza and that he could not explain Netanyahu's refusal to reach a ceasefire deal. In another sign of a potential deteriorating diplomatic path forward, officials in Qatar announcing over the weekend they are ending the mediation effort between Israel and Hamas and warned Hamas's political bureau that it was no longer welcome in the country. Joining me now from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, NBC News chief international correspondent Keir Simmons. So, Keir, Arab leaders are meeting there in Riyadh now. What are they saying about where this war effort stands? Do they see a diplomatic path here still?
Well, actually, what they're saying is pretty tough and has got tougher over the past year. They put out a list tonight of demands, if you like, including condemnation of Israel, support for the International Criminal Court's actions against Israel, even calling for reparations and relating to both Gaza and Lebanon. Whatever you think of that, and clearly there will be critics who will say, despite the fact that this is 80 countries, Arab and Islamic countries, that it's wrong. What it does indicate is that those countries have been pushed closer together by what has happened in the past year. And one illustration of that is the fact that the Iranian vice president has been here. And just listen to what the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia said at the beginning of this summit today. He said, "We call on the international community to compel Israel to respect the sovereignty of our sister country, Iran." Iran, that was in recent decades an adversary of Saudi Arabia. Now you've got the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia saying something like that. I think it illustrates the different world that President-elect Trump will inherit, completely different from 2016 and much more complex. And that means more challenges. He says he wants peace here in the Middle East and also, of course, with Ukraine and Russia, as you were talking about earlier. But the hurdles in the way of achieving that are different now than they were even 12 months ago.
All right, Keir Simmons for us in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia today. Keir, thank you.